Greetings, pilgrims, and welcome to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage. And today, I'm very excited to share with you the first part in a two-part little series here of my progress with the Substance Designer Bi-Weekly Challenge. Now, this week, or this set of weeks here, we were challenged to create different circuit boards, and this one here happens to be a memory chip, or a memory stick, however you want to call it. So this is my progress so far. It's not complete, but I wanted to show you some of the things I've been doing so far. A lot of it is pretty basic stuff, so I'm going to kind of gloss over some of the more of the specifics, but anything that you guys have trouble with, please let me know. I'll be happy to explain it and help you guys with it. But right now, let's just go through. We got a bunch of stuff to cover here, so let's jump down here and take a look first at our reference. So this is our reference image here. So you can see here, so this is a memory chip, and the actual chip is the whole board here, and then we have the gold contacts. And then we have the actual memory modules here, so each of these is a module for that. And then what we're going to do here is talk about how I created all the different shapes. And you can see here a lot of this is taking the image, the raw image, and then a little bit of a transform 2D to scale it down, and then blending that with something to get the shape and kind of cut it down so I could see it better. And then you notice here there's something kind of gray over top of here. That's because I proclaim this a lot. It's a great way to work is have your reference and then build directly on top of it. Pardon me. So then what you do is you take the piece that you are working on and I put it on the top input, and you can see here the opacity is at 0.11. So then I can say, okay, does it line up? Does it fit? This is definitely needed if you're doing things that have to match exactly. So that's a neat little trick that most people don't seem to do, and I just wanted to kind of explain that. And then here are some of my masks as I was working through to make the different selections. You can see how it builds up there. And again, at the end, we'll have like an ID map, and that'd be perfect to throw into like Painter or any other kind of program that requires that. So let's begin at the beginning, way up here. So to get the actual circuit board itself, what we're doing is essentially just getting some shapes. So this here is a shape node with the square, and I just brought the Y down to 0.25, which means there can be 4 of these along here. Transform, and I'm going to shrink it just a little bit, especially on the edges, so that here you can see it's not exactly to the edge, so we don't get any bleeding problems. Then the rest of this is just cutting out from our shape and getting the different pieces that we need. Since this thing is essentially a rectangle, most of it's done right there. So we do another shape node, a circle this time, scale it down, use it as a subtractive mask to get that cut out. Then we do it again, move it over to a different spot, cut out from a different spot. And see, we're doing that over and over again. So then here, this is taking a square that I use for something else, but do a transform, scale it around, get it to the right spot, and then cut it out right here. And now you'll notice that little lip that gets cut out there, one of the things that I learned recently is to make sure that when you are using, let's see, where was it? One of the was it transform node? Yes. Change your MIP map mode here to manual. If you change it from automatic to manual, you get much crisper lines along the edges. And some of the earlier episodes that I've done, I had some issues that I had to deal with a little bit of MIP mapping, a little bit of blurring on the edges. So this is a godsend to change that and make sure you get some crisp edges. Okay, so then we're going to take this square, we're just going to start scaling it, moving it around. And you can see as we start to put these things together. So again, taking a square, putting it off the edge, and then a circle, putting them together, we get these little notches out of the side. There we go. It's starting to look like something there. Same thing here. Put another one there. And then this is, we're going to do a mirror, I believe. Yeah, so I mirror this along the right-hand side. But then when you put the two together, notice here I'm using the cropping area of 0.5. So I'm saying only from the 0.5 over. That way I can mirror an object that was perfectly white on this side, and I'm not going to lose the holes that I have here. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking just the left half or just the right half and putting those two together, and now voila, it is completely centered. There we go. So that goes off, and we can put all that through all our height stuff, but we'll come back to that. So to create the gold contacts, so if I zoom in here, you'll see, ignore the background of this, I'm not happy with that, it's still kind of experimental, but to create these gold contacts along the bottom, these guys right here, this is how I went about doing that. So tile generator, and I chose, let's see, what do we choose here? Pattern of brick, specific pattern of 0.25, non-square is true, and then put the pattern up to 50, just to get enough of them across here. Then, I think that's it for most of this. Let's double check. Scale 1.05, overblew it just a little bit, and everything else should be fine. Luminance random I did put to 0.07. I just wanted a little bit of randomness to make sure that they're not all the same. Maybe some are a little bit more weathered, you know, who knows, little imperfections in the manufacturing. So that's all for this. Then we do a transform, and I'm going to scale it down and move it into position, do a levels on that, and I'm just bringing this middle input down just a little bit to kind of even that out. Then I'm going to do a color to mask and choose the white. That helps me separate the individual teeth, if you will, a lot better. Choosing white there, transform to move it over to the other side, and then a blend to put the two together. So then now we have those two sets of contacts. There we go. Those guys are done. Now, the memory chip, the actual edge cutout. So this is each of these memory chips, this little edge notch here that gets cut out. And you can see they're not totally done yet, but I took my square, scale it, put it in the right position. Then this guy is cutting out, and if I follow that input, it's from down here, this little circle here, okay? So I'm going to cut that out entirely. Then I'm going to transform and do the same trick I did before, but this time on a vertical. So I have mirror on the vertical, and then when I blend the two together, I say only take, again, 0.5 right down the middle. So now I get that cut out on both sides. All right, so down here, we're doing something different. We're going to take this circle, and I'm going to cut out from it a smaller version of itself, which is even further down, to make the little circle here. Then I need to do a trim, and I'm going to trim from using this guy, say only where this is do I want to keep this, which means I'm going to lose the bottom half of it. Et voila, there we go. So we lose the bottom half, and this is perfect for that little piece in there. I don't know the name of it, but it's like a little, almost like a little contact piece in there. Okay, same thing again. We're going to put this guy up on top, put the two together. There we go. Now each of these I've separated out, and we combine them later, but we need these as individual masks in order to identify them, isolate them, and color them. So moving down, the actual whole of that is the smaller piece, and then cut off using the mask, and then we're going to transform, move it up, and then we have two of those. So that actually sits just inside of this. It'll be in the bottom piece, and then both of these sit just inside this shape. So we kind of put them all together. And then the actual hole itself, this little hole here, I don't know what to call this, but it's just a little hole that's on each of the memory modules. So there he is. He's just all by himself. Okay, so then this is the full mask of that. So this is the full mask, not including, this is not done, obviously, the little pieces that go inside there, because we have to have that little trim piece, which is going to go here, and then the rest of it does just sort of fade away, and we do see the board behind it, so we don't actually need that. Okay, so now the memory chip contacts, that's these guys here, which look way too dirty right now. I played around with some dirt mask earlier than I should, you know, just get excited making it pretty. So tile generator again, this is very much the same thing, but I'm going to turn it on its head. So this is 48, and I'm going to rotate that using a transform 2D. Should use a safe transform 2D, but I did not, so shame on me. Then we're going to scale it down and just kind of put it into place. Again, do a levels. And I'm going to crunch it down this way a bit to kind of, I want to accent the gaps to make sure that those gaps are present and that we actually see them. So if I scale in a little bit more here, you can see those gaps just a little bit. So the levels there, transform 2D to move one to the other side, and then combine them. So now we have that. Very cool. Now I wanted to make sure that these have, as you can see here, this part right here is very, very light, and then it kind of gradates off. And I played around with the curve node, trying to make that happen, and it didn't seem to really want to happen. But we did a gradient transform it down, scale it way down. I just hit the divide by 2 multiple times. And then I'm going to put that over top of it. And this is on a multiply of 0.75. And then I crunch it down with the levels a little bit. I'm going to move everything over here just a little bit, and then transform and put it together. So now it's hard to tell, but yes, these do have a bit of a gradient off to the end, and we're going to use that as an overlay later on. Okay, so now this is combining all of our memory chip contacts, the masks, I'm combining them all together. And this was early on in the build. You'll see later I started creating a nomenclature for frames, and I'll talk about that. That's a pretty cool thing. So I'm going to take the first one is okay where it is, but I'm going to move this one over and then combine them. And this is always with just an add linear dodge. Very simple, just adding them together. So then over and over again, we're going to add another, and then do the flip trick to put the set on the other side. There we go. So now for the full memory chips themselves, to build up the entire full mask, they should say the word full up here. So bring this guy in. So there he is. So this is a blend of the two. That's all he is. And you can see it kind of gradates off. This should be using the other one that is pure white. So this is everything, and then again, we're just going to move one over, move one over, move one over, and then flip and blend. So now, the important thing here is that this is a transform, and we just moved. We did not do a mirror, because then these holes would be on the wrong side. So if you look carefully, that's true in the reference, so that's an important tip there. Okay, so with all of that done, we can start to talk about our height build, our diffuse build, and I got a really cool experiment down here to show you guys. Okay, so let's talk about the height build. So up here, this is the kind of nomenclature that I started, just putting the word for what is the type of the input that we're working on in these brackets. So when I look at it, I know instantly this whole group is going to be a height. This is height information. Okay, and whose height information is it I'm looking at? This is the memory chip. So these guys, the way these guys work is, essentially, it's just a color over top of a mask, an alpha. And most of these colors, if I drop this out, are going to be either white or they're going to be getting progressively darker. So you see here, this guy's pretty white because he should be the most forefront. And then we have things that go beneath it. But then these guys do actually come on top of that. That's why they're kind of the whitest. And you see they get progressively darker. So here we have darker and darker still. And then here's the darkest, and then when they are all combined, they actually end up like this. And then we take all of that and put it up here and say, let's add on top of that our contacts. There we go. So now this is one whole memory chip module thing. So then again, we're going to say, okay, move that over, move that over, move that over, and then another set. And these are using the exact same inputs I did before. I just copied and pasted them, brought them up here, and then reconnected the inputs where they needed to be. And now we have that same numbers to make sure everything lines up properly. Okay. So for the height for the circuit board, that's the actual background thing, see? So I didn't want this to be completely black, and you see here, if I look at this, or completely gray, he's down to 64, just so that it is a little bit in the background. I generally tend to try to start around 128 and work upward from there, and then I also have from 128 down to 0 to work downward from there if you have kind of a downward cutout. But since this is going to be the most background thing, I still wanted to stick up a little bit when you really turn on the height information and blow that out. But I didn't want it to be too far down, so 64 is a good spot. There we go. So then we're going to do the same thing for the gold accents. These are on top of that just a little bit. So if I look at that numbers, this guy is at 84. Okay, so salt to taste. The more I look at reference for this, the gold contacts are actually a little bit closer to it. They're kind of it almost looks like they're painted on. I know that's not how they're built, but it's kind of how it looks. Okay, so then we add the memory chips, and you see how bright they are in comparison because they are on top of it and they're pushing forward. So that should really be the most here. And you'll notice that I have a problem. This is not bringing forward this work that we did over here to create these things. They're getting kind of lost in there, so I need to work on that a little bit. But the essential idea here is that we're combining everything. And there'll be a lot more work before we call this done. Okay, so then down here, let's talk about the diffuse build. So here, diffuse, and what am I building? Memory chips, all. Okay, so the memory chip itself, let me look at just one of these guys. There we go. So this is just the color right now, just the raw color, and we still have more to do on these. We need the text on them and all kinds of stuff. So then I'm going to add to that. I'm going to add that contact right there. And I'm going to add, let's see, come on. I think it's just adding, yeah, it's adding that little hole there. So I didn't want it to be totally black, but we just put some color in there to definitely indicate that it is downward from that spot. I'm going to add our contacts. There we go. And then this is the same tree again. If you notice, we're going to move one over, move one over, move one over. And then we're going to move and combine, and now they're all there. And they still, like I said, they still need some more work, but we're getting there. So the diffuse for the circuit board. So diffuse, circuit board, background. Very good. Then diffuse, we're going to add the gold contacts. There they are. Diffuse, we're going to add the memory chips. There they are. We just built them from here, so we're adding them in. Now I note that if it's diffuse, what am I building versus I'm adding something. So that just tells me that if it's just a simple color overlay or something like that, we're just going to add it to the whole group. And these are all pulling from different masks. Very good. Okay, so that's essentially the whole build so far. But then over here, all I've done is, hook up the inputs, and then I am doing this ×3 just so you can see a bit more of them on one screen image. So then you can look at it multiple times, see how it tiles, that kind of thing. But let's talk about the interesting part, this background here, which is crazy busy and looks all tech and cool, but it's not quite accurate yet, so I'm working on that. But I did see some really clever stuff that 80 Level shared. I apologize, I don't know the name of the artist off the top of my head, but I will do my best to find it and put it in the description for you. He had some really cool tips and techniques on how to do some circuit lines. So this is built on that idea, and then I took it with a different direction, so I wanted to show you some of the cool things we did there. Okay, so essentially the trick that he showed is that we're using a tile sampler, but in these different inputs, and this is like a pattern distribution input, and these are different scale inputs and the pattern input, you put in a different shape. So you'll notice here that I get this kind of line, and what's neat about this is this was totally by accident, and then it turned out to be wonderful. I take this polygon and I said, I know I want these sort of angled shapes because I want these cool lines, creating those sort of straight line, and then it goes to a 45 and then it goes straight again. I was thinking, how am I going to do that? So I thought, well, if I start with this shape and I distribute it enough, I might end up with some of that. So I did a transform 2D, and my goal here was just to keep this middle piece. But what I forgot to do is turn off the tiling mode. But it ended up being a blessing in disguise, because when you look at this, we get all kinds of these little pieces by themselves, and the way that they line up with things was just absolutely awesome. So what we're going to do here is, and then of course this polygon is just a diamond, but he's in this spot, which is the pattern distribution. So put that in there. So from there, I'm going to do a histogram scan, and I'm going to bring this down. This is position of 0.26, pardon me, and contrast of 0.52. And this guy is 0.28, 0.52, just a little different. And I'm going to throw these through different levels, and I'm going to crunch these a little bit. So let's see, this guy didn't really crunch much at all. And then transform, I moved him just a little bit. You'll notice it's 0.0102 and 0.0006. I just kind of dragged it slightly with the mouse. And when you put those two together with a subtract, look what you get. These really cool kind of tech sci-fi looking lines, right? And what's neat about them is they do what I was looking for, is that straight line, angle, straight again, right? So by taking that and I throw it through the levels a little bit and kind of crunch everything down, I'm trying to get a lot of solid white in here, and I am ending up with some full-on shapes, and I was like, okay, that's fine, we'll deal with that. So then I'm going to transform, and I'm going to flip it, and then I'm going to put the two together again. And by doing that, I end up with some really cool overlapping lines. So the crux of that was his tutorial. He does a lot of this tile sampler, and then the real secret is multiple edge detects. Okay, so here's the real magic here. So this is our circuit line definition. So if I throw it into the first edge detect, very important here, I'm going to take the edge roundness and crunch it to 0. My edge width is at 2.5. I'm going to throw that result into another edge detect. Again, crunching my edge roundness to 0 and putting this at 2, and you can see we're starting to get some of these lines where you can say, okay, these are kind of those cool tech line patterns. Now, I'm going to throw that into another edge detect. Again, roundness of 0, 1.75. You can start to see we're getting some of these parallel lines, and they're all following these cool shapes. Throw it into another one, you're starting to get really crazy here, but I put this at 1.125, and you can see that we just get these very thin lines, and I'm getting some of these internal lines. And I thought, okay, that's pretty cool. What happens if I go back to my pattern here and throw this into a negative edge detect? So I threw this into a -2, throw that into a 1.75, throw that into a 1.125, and then blend the two together on multiply, and look what you get. So now we have these cool lines that are going in the angled and straight directions, but now they almost have they're like miniature superhighways with multiple lanes within them. And that really looks like some of the cool tech, circuit board type patterns we're looking for. Not specifically the ones I'm looking for here, but as I was trying to develop some lines that would look neat, I thought I would share with you my results. So now here, to create the mask is pretty complex, because I'm going to take another edge detect from somewhere, from way back up here, let's see, from our first one. And this edge detect is an edge detect of 3, because I'm trying to create more of a rounded shape that will encapsulate everything that came before it. And by blending this with, let's take a look what we're blending this with, and if we follow this line, this guy. So we're blending this guy with an edge detected version of himself. Putting them together, you'll see we're starting to get like a full coverage map is what we're looking for. We put that into an invert grayscale. Now, in theory, everything that is white is what we want for our mask, but it's not quite so. So what I'm going to do here is, this is a blend, and I'm taking, let's come a little bit here, I want to take everything that's in here, all of my cool highway lines, right? but I only want them where there is white here. So by putting those two together, I get that, and that's pretty cool. That's most of the way there, but you'll notice we have these weird pockets of white in the background, and we don't really want that. So how do we get rid of that? Well, this is the way that I found kind of to do it. So this is a blend on multiply of, and let's look back here in our stack here. So that is coming from this guy that we did earlier when we had these lines, and, no, don't do that, and from the guy right before him. So if you'll notice, these lines are kind of that interior, and then these lines kind of are an expansion of those edges outward. So by putting the two together on multiply, it kind of combines all the dark areas. Okay, so we're getting these internal things. Now, if I take this and say only where there is white, I want to keep this, you end up with this. And you'll notice that it takes it away. I do end up with these tiny little white lines here. I think it's okay, and I put it into a color mask and say only give me the white, so only give me the spaces here, and then invert that grayscale. And that's a pretty good approximation. So now if I take this, I want my highway lines only where this is white. This is what you get. And it gets rid of a good majority of it. There's still some spaces in there like this and over here, but it gets rid of a good majority. So then over here I said, well, let's experiment with that. So this is our final here so far. So this is with the circuit board pattern with these lines in the background. I just chose a color from above, put the circuit board in the background, but we need to make sure that we get our proper mask. So our proper mask here is, this is the full circuit board with the gold contacts removed. Then we're going to remove from that the memory chips. And then from that, I'm going to say, give me this, only where there is white here, it gives you this. And there's our circuit pattern, which looks really neat here. But then once you put it on here and you look at it here, I don't like it yet. And it doesn't match our reference. So if you look at our reference here, these lines are much thinner, much more spaced out, and they have all these little dots at the ends of them. So I'm going to keep working on it and see what I can do there. And I still have more to do. There's still these little guys down here. They go all around here. There's this guy here. And again, we've got the text going on here. And we got to make sure that these show up. But you see how that actual inner part that we did, we don't need. It's going to just go straight through to the back. So that's okay. And then some minor things like this is actually shorter here, and this is much longer here. But I'm doing one that is completely centered down the, mirrored down the center. So this is not quite that, but it's pretty close. And so I think this is kind of neat, but I don't like the background yet. I'm not happy with it. But I wanted to show you guys, part of art is experimenting, trying new things, learning. I even tried, up here you can see, I tried to say, what happens if I really reduce this pattern and get it just down to here? And because if you look at the reference, there's really just a large collection of them here, and there's just a few throughout. So I thought, oh, maybe if I do that, maybe it's because they're all behind these, but that didn't work out either. But I tried. So, experiment, try it out, see what you think. And as always, I will put this up when it's complete. It's not complete yet, but I want to finish it up, get the text in there, do everything I can do. And then I will put it up to share with you guys. So I hope this was helpful, just to kind of show the thought process behind how we build these things. A couple little tricks in here, like naming your things properly, making sure that when I look at a frame, I know exactly the contents contained within there. I can just look at it and go, oh, this is going to be diffuse information. That's a cool trick. And then doing the things we did in here where we flip things and we use the scaling here, the cropping area, to say, let's crop it down so we can have a mirror, a true mirror that we can kind of start at any point instead of mirroring or flipping something. And especially if it's something like this that has holes on one side, you would have lost them on the other side if you didn't do that properly. But with this trick, we can do that. So I wanted to share with you guys a couple of tips and tricks as I go about my journey here and share some of the cool content. I will look for the name of the artist who deserves credit for this cool effect. His circuit board, of course, looks awesome. So check it out. I will put the link in the description. And I hope the rest of this is helpful. And I may put up this one, but I don't think so. I think I'll just put up the final when it's all done and share with you guys the final result. And as always, it's fun to just flex our mental muscles, create something totally new. And of course, anything computers and tech, we're using software to do art, so we are attracted to that kind of thing. So thank you so much for joining me this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed very much. Until next time, guys, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.